Hey everybody, we're back. We're looking at exploring world history, lesson number 29, and we're going to be talking about King Solomon, okay? The time of King Solomon. Solomon's rule over Israel, okay, it was pretty prominent. He ruled from around 970 BC to 931 BC. It was the height of Israel's wealth and international power. This was the time where you wanted to be an Israelite because the world knew who you were and you were important. Everything was going right for you. Solomon ruled with a firm hand and a very efficient bureaucracy. He was known for his wisdom and knowledge, Unfortunately, though, his tenure ended in spiritual failure. So let's look at again just an overview of Solomon's life. First, let's talk about his faithfulness. Solomon loved the Lord and walked in the statutes of his father David. Basically, David told him on his deathbed, you need to serve the Lord and live for the Lord. And Solomon started out that way and tried to do the best he could. And the Lord talked to Solomon and asked him what he wanted, and he said wisdom. And so the Lord gave him wisdom. And everyone in the kingdom enjoyed peace and prosperity during this time. Like I said, it was the time you wanted to be an Israelite. His wisdom and knowledge and learning were known throughout that part of the world. The Lord gave him a very wise and discerning heart. Solomon wrote often. He wrote over 3,000 proverbs. He wrote the Song of Solomon and wrote, they say, about 1,005 songs. One of the most famous stories in the Bible concerning his wisdom is where he has two women come before him, and one of the babies died, and the other one was living, and the women were saying that the baby was there. So Solomon says, "Bring me a sword. I'll cut the baby in half. You both can have half," because they couldn't figure out whose baby it was. And the mother whose baby died said, "Sure, that's fine." And the other one said, "No, she can have her." And so Solomon knew at that point the mother who wanted the baby to live was the true mother. And so that story kind of spread throughout the nation and through everything, and it kind of made him even more famous than he had been. His kingdom and governance was, like I said, at the top of it, but it was very large. There was a lot of bureaucracy. His kingdom was from the Euphrates River all the way to Egypt. He had other kings that were subject to him, and they brought tribute to him. They served Solomon. They enjoyed peace with all his neighbors. He oversaw a very large body of government officials, from priests, secretaries, recorders, leaders of armies, deputies. The whole entire labor force were all under Solomon's control at some point, okay? His wealth was astronomical, things that we couldn't even imagine, okay? He was just overwhelmingly rich. He had 40,000 horse stalls. He had 12,000 horsemen. That's kind of like saying he had a 40,000 car garage and 12,000 drivers. Just huge. He had 200 large shields of gold. Page 147 of your book, it says, each of Solomon's deputies was responsible for provisions for the king and his household for 1 month of the year. Providing for the king was a major undertaking. The provisions for Solomon's court for 1 day included 300 bushels of fine flour, 600 bushels of meal, 10 fat oxen, 20 pasture-fed oxen, 100 sheep, deer, gazelle, roebucks, fattened fowl, and barley, as well as straw for the 40,000 stalls of horses, okay? That was for 1 day, okay? He also was responsible for foreign commerce and sea travel. He was very powerful in his foreign relations. Like I said, most everybody recognized him and gave him some type of allegiance. You had the king of Hiram of Tyre. They had a very special relationship that started with his father David. And he provided the cedars of Lebanon for the temple build. Everything that Solomon needed to build, not just the temple, but also his own palace, was provided by this King Hiram of Tyre, okay? And in return, Solomon provided him food for his whole entire kingdom as well as security. This was a 20+ year relationship that was going on. He also had a fleet of ships that ran around on the Red Sea. Your book says King Solomon built a fleet of ships on the shore of the Red Sea. Hiram had sailors who knew the sea. These sailors went with the fleet along with servants of Solomon. The fleet brought back 420 talents of gold from Ophir. The ships also brought back almug trees and precious stones. King Solomon used almug wood to make harps and lyres. Solomon also had ships of Tarshish. Once every 3 years, the ships of Tarshish brought gold, silver, ivory, apes, peacocks, lots of other things back to them. Solomon imported horses and chariots from Egypt that were paid for in silver. He also had merchants who got horses from Kew. He just was incredibly rich, and just everywhere and everything had abundance. He had 2 major building projects that he accomplished during his time. The first is the temple that he built, and it took him 7 years. And then he also built his own palace, and that took 13 years, so a little longer than building the temple. You can look back on that and decide what you think about that. He had a few other building projects that he did. He did a citadel called Milo. He built some cities, Hazor and Megiddo. He built the wall of Jerusalem, several other storage cities that he built. The labor that he was responsible for was just crazy. He conscripted 30,000 laborers, 30,000 laborers, and they would work for a month and have 2 months off. And they would just kind of rotate through. He had 3,300 chief deputies. He had 70,000 transporters, people who took things that he needed places. He had 80,000 stone hewers, people who would go and work the quarries and dig out the stone for him. But the problem that Solomon ran into is he had everything he wanted. And so he continued to just kind of look for other things. And one of the things he looked for and he had was wives, He turned to foreign wives on a regular basis. Part of that was typical during the time to shore up allegiances, but it drew his heart away from God. He had 700 wives and 300 concubines. They caused him to worship other gods. He set up basically temples for other gods and would worship with his wives these other gods. And ultimately, it truly drew his heart away from God and was a problem. Page 150 of your book, it says this. It says this, The everyday people of Israel during Solomon's reign received mixed signals from their king. His early devotion to God, reflected in the building of the temple, was obvious. God's blessings on Solomon were equally apparent. Yet, while many enjoyed prosperity, thousands of Israelites were forced to work on Solomon's building projects. Solomon's spiritual downfall must have left many Israelites wondering what had happened to him. His marrying many foreign wives was a poor example for others to follow. The people of Israel were adversely affected by the political intrigues that followed Solomon's reign. How different the history of Israel might have been if Solomon had continued to serve the Lord faithfully and if he had continued to live by the wisdom that God had given him. Thanks.